What's the scariest thing you witnessed with your own eyes? When I was around 6, we were going to my grandparents' house. On the interstate, a woman seemed to fall out of a car in front of us. My dad had to swerve to avoid hitting her. That's all I saw with my own eyes. It turned out the woman's husband was trying to murder her and make it look like a suicide. The intention was for my dad to have run her over, but he has time to swerve. The husband had an accomplice behind us, but he couldn't hit her because of how my dad swerved. Some other good Samaritan stopped and gave the woman a ride to the hospital. The guy who gave her a ride and my dad were both called as witnesses at the trial. The husband and the accomplice were both convicted for conspiracy for attempted murder. Was home alone as a teenager during an aggravated burglary. Heard something slamming into front door. Went to go open it and realized I had locked the wire screen door. So it seemed odd they were knocking so hard directly onto the wooden door. Instead looked out the window and to the side to see a heavy man that I did not recognize. I yelled out, "What did he want?" No answer. Yelled a few more times. He stopped. Then started shoulder ramming the door. I panicked and went to grab the phone and a kitchen knife. But halfway to the kitchen, I heard a huge crash at the back end of the house. Meanwhile the ramming was still happening at the front door. Heard someone scurrying through the back of the house swearing. Panicking, I didn't want to get caught in the middle of the house by two people, so decided to burst out through the front door and bowl over whoever was out there. Knowing it was just one person, because I had seen him through the window. So that's what I did. Exploded out the front door, knocked the guy over, and ran out into the street and to a neighbor's and called the police. They were gone by the time the police arrived. Incidentally, they came back twice the next week, and again when I wasn't home. The neighbors told me, ended up catching them, but definitely left a lasting fear in me. Helped a woman move out of her apartment maybe 90 minutes after the murder-suicide of her husband and son. Police were done, but the room had not been cleaned. A very sad and harrowing experience for me. That's the thing you never think about until it happens to you. Cops, paramedics, fire crews, etc. will come take care of the emergency, but once it's done and they are gone, you're left to clean up the mess. Even if you're too messed up emotionally, it's usually still on you to handle. Good on you for helping the lady out. When my son drowned in my in-laws' pool, they had put that yellow crime scene investigation tape all around the pool. While planning his funeral, my mom and I had to make a trip out to my in-laws to get his favorite animal for him. It was at their house. Because I was working that day and they were watching him, my mom pulled all the way up into the driveway, not even realizing what she had done, and I had a clear vision of the pool with the tape. When I saw that, I immediately felt nauseous and had to vomit. It's been almost 2 years, and I still can't bring myself to go out back. The rest of the family still gets in the pool when they have get-togethers, but I have no desire to get in that pool. I just hang out inside the house and people will come in and talk with me, but when I see their pool, it's like I get hit with a semi-truck. I feel like my breath is knocked out of me as the image of my baby going down the pool slide and then laying in a hospital bed fighting for his life take over my brain, and I can't make it stop. Was there in the emergency room with someone close to me who had just died from a completely random brain aneurysm/seizure episode. Being there overlooking someone you know well and had just spoken 2 hours earlier with a flat line on the heart monitor is pretty terrifying. Especially when we had talked about death as an idea/concept not long before. My dad died from a brain hemorrhage when I was 17. We had a lovely family dinner the night prior. My mum came into my room at 2 AM saying that something was wrong with dad and he couldn't get up off the floor after collapsing at the toilet. We both had no idea what was going on and thought maybe he had too many sleeping tablets, he couldn't talk and was just mumbling and coming in and out of consciousness snoring whilst curled up on the ground. I said, "Can you grab my hand if you can hear me?" And he squeezed it hard. After that he started choking on his tongue. All I remember is sticking my fingers in his mouth trying to stop the choking on his tongue whilst his jaw was locked. That went on for around 30 minutes whilst on the phone to emergency. He was declared brain dead by around 7 AM. I just wish I knew the severity of the situation at the time. Not that it might have changed anything, but in my head I thought everything would be fine once he got to hospital. Unfortunately it wasn't how it panned out. Now whenever I get a headache my anxiety shoots through the roof, and whenever someone close to me has a medical problem, I always think of the worst case scenario. It sucks. It was many years ago. I was driving Uber, heading home and the sun was coming up. There was a girl laying in the road. Got out to check on her. She was passed out. I dragged her to the side of the road and could smell the booze, so I woke her up. She immediately tried to get up and run back into oncoming traffic saying she wanted to die and her friends were so mean. I held her down while she fought me screaming until the ambulance came. She was 15. The ambulance took her away. I hope she's okay and got help she needed. Driving up to an amusement park, Kings Island. There is this longer exit as it gets off the highway. My friend's mom just started getting on the exit lane and me and my buddy, probably around 10, watched this person jump in front of a semi. It was like the whole world just kinda stopped for those few moments. As we drove past the body I fully remember the jeans around their ankle and the body just twitching. I really don't think I will ever forget the image. When I was 12, my family and I took a road trip to Florida, and as my mom was driving through Ocala, I saw a store with police tape around the gas pumps and a car with a limp body laying halfway out of the open driver's store door and a pool of blood on the ground in front of him. It looked like, and probably was, a murder scene, and nobody else in the car seemed to notice it. I never mentioned it to any of them. I just stayed quiet and tried to forget what I just saw. It still haunts me. More recently, I saw a man try to ride his bike through an automatic gate before it shut, and he didn't make it. He slammed into the gate, and one of the spikes impaled him through the neck. This was at one of my job sites, landscaping, Hoa condo complex, and my coworker gave him a towel to hold over his gaping neck wound. The man was still conscious and standing. We called 911 and an ambulance took him to the hospital. About a week later, we were back at that location and the man approached me in good spirits. He was thankful that we helped him out, and I was glad to see he was okay. Apparently, the spike missed a major artery by a hair. Finally, when I was 9, my brother and I were walking around Daytona Beach with a friend, barefoot on beachside in the bad part of town. Our friend thought it would be a good idea to pick up a stick and poke a homeless man who was sleeping behind a hedgerow in a parking lot. And when the man didn't respond, he continued to poke him. Finally, the man had enough, grabbed a gun from under his sleeping bag, and pointed it at us. He told us to get our ass away from his bush, and we ran like hell. In retrospect, it was more sad than scary, and we totally deserved the scare. He just wanted to be left alone, and good on him for having protection. I only learned years later how many homeless people are beaten to death by sick young punks. Damn. Apparently I have a couple of them, and I can't really decide. When my second nephew was born my brother lived in a house that smelled so strongly of mold. I told him it made my eyes burn. When I walked in, my then sister-in-law for some reason had always dreamt of living in that house, because her older brother had. I did everything I could to clean it before the baby came. It was in an old town, and it was a town doctor's house from like the early 1900s. They got tired of me complaining once he was born, and I wasn't allowed back. My mom died, and a few weeks later I got a call that he was about to die too. Went to the hospital, and he was covered in mold. Seriously, mold. I held him in my arms while he was screaming, and he just smelled like the same mold in that house. I had a moldy baby in my arms that I helped deliver a few weeks earlier, and every time he threw up on me, I almost threw up too. He got transferred to an intensive care unit about an hour away, and at night they would go out to the bars and get drunk and leave him alone. I take back my previous entries. This was the most terrifying. I hate them for being such irresponsible bad parents that should have never had a child. I cut all ties with everyone directly after that. He lived and I'm so glad. He has no idea who I am. Driving home from work one night, tons of traffic. I'm sitting second at a red light turning left, and this truck stops in the opposite lane to leave an opening so the car in front of me can turn. It was a traffic jam, so he would have stopped in the intersection if he didn't. Car turns. Out of nowhere this semi is driving super fast along the side of the road, not in a lane. 1 second the turning car is there, the next second it is blown to pieces. I was turning right behind them. Maybe was 10 feet away from it. Felt almost surreal how close I was. That's terrifying. I've saw a car accident too. But the most terrifying thing I ever saw is the aftermath of a bike accident. There's unusually lots of traffic. Then I saw blood splattered everywhere, and lying on the street is a biker with brain burst out of his head. I ride slower than usual that night. After I saw that, I worked in a kitchen for a couple summers at a Cub Scout camp in the Midwest. I usually worked late nights, mainly watching the main building I was in, and watching over the people who had special needs, mainly in the form of people who took temperature sensitive medication. I remember one night it was storming, and we were under a tornado watch. Protocol said we don't have to call the campers to the shelters unless a warning was issued. So to prevent unnecessary worry and concern, the counselor head gave me a radio and basically said, watch the radar. If a warning is issued, let me know, and we'll wake everyone else up. Around midnight, I was pleasantly shaken by the sound of Tom from the National Weather Service report that our county was now under a tornado warning. So I radioed the head, and through a lot of curse words, I heard him say, I'll wake the others. You get the lights on. 5 minutes later, all staff are now awake and splitting into teams to begin waking campers, while I was tracking the movement of a funnel cloud on my phone's radar app. In typical leader fashion, he told me, grab an air horn, get in a golf cart, and go out. I'll take over here. So I did. Just as I was leaving, the first people from one of the closest campsites arrived, and the worst possible news was brought to us. Little Timmy Tiger Scout had gotten scared and disappeared into the forest. Both parents were still searching, and the rest of the cub pack was pretty worried. So the head turns to me and says, don't worry, we've got a staff member going over there right now, as he looks right at me. So I left and began making my way down there in my golf cart. I found the parents still looking for their kid, but no kid. So after telling the father to come with me, and both the father and myself telling the mother to go back, the two of us left to continue the search on the trails. We ended up finding the little devil near the climbing tower. He had hidden at the base and was lying flat down, so I'll give him props for trying to be safe. Still, we got him on the cart, and just as I turned us around, like a scene from Twister, a bolt of lightning illuminated the sky just in time for all three of us to see this large, dark funnel past the trees. Now because the trails that led back to the main building also led straight to God's finger, I turned us around and began driving towards a couple lodges that I knew were nearby. Next to the climbing tower was the High Adventures course, and about 500 feet past that was two lodges that were only ever used during the winter. So I drove us over there. We broke our way in and sat there until the lights above us stopped shaking. Afterwards, our golf cart survived, so we used that to drive back, got into the main building, and as the family was reunited, I promptly told the head he could go screw himself, got my stuff together, and left in my truck that morning. The rain still falling, and the branches still all over the road. Hell hath no fury like Mother Nature.